Before you hear this story, I need you to do something for me. Picture the person in your life who thinks they have you all figured out. The one who has you neatly filed away in a little box in their head. Maybe you're the creative one, which is their code for chronically broke. Maybe you're the reliable one, which means you're the first one they call for help and the last one they invite to the party. For me, in the world according to my brother-in-law Howard, I was the fun uncle. It was a role I had apparently been typecast in for the better part of a decade. The lovable idiot. The guy who was great at building Lego spaceships with his kids, Leo and Maya, but whose eyes would glaze over if the conversation turned to anything more complex than the weather. To Howard, I was a charming, simple-minded jester in the royal court of his magnificent life. A harmless fool you could pat on the head, laugh at, and safely ignore. He's the chief financial officer of Innovera Pharma, a name you'd probably recognize. His life is a curated collection of status symbols: the corner office, the German sports car, the 7,000 square foot house in the hills overlooking Denver. My life, by contrast, is a collection of invoices. I'm a freelance consultant, a title so vague that Howard found it endlessly amusing. "So what are you consulting on this week, Andy?" he'd ask at family dinners, a smirk playing on his lips. "The migratory patterns of garden gnomes." My sister Sarah, his wife, would offer a tight, apologetic smile, a silent plea for me to just play along. And for years I did. I'd just chuckle and say something self-deprecating, confirming his deeply held belief that I was a man who knew nothing of the real world. The real world, of course, being the one of quarterly earnings calls, stock options, and ruthless corporate strategy. This morning, Howard's real world caught fire. Innovera's annual audit report came back. It wasn't just bad, it was a 5-alarm corporate disaster. The auditors flagged what they politely termed massive irregularities. The board, I heard, went into a state of collective panic. The report pointed to potential fraud, creative accounting that bordered on criminal, and a systemic failure of financial controls. And the man whose signature was at the bottom of every fraudulent document, the man who was supposed to be the guardian of the company's financial integrity, was Howard. What Howard doesn't know, what he couldn't possibly fathom in his wildest, most arrogant dreams, is that the board, in a push for absolute transparency, had hired a discreet, third-party firm from a blind pool list to conduct that audit. They wanted a team with no prior connection to Innovera, a ghost that could move through their books and leave no trace but the truth. That anonymous firm, Veritas Analytics, is my company. And for the last 3 months, I haven't been consulting on garden gnomes. I've been meticulously, quietly, and I admit, personally documenting every corrupt, self-serving deal my brother-in-law has made for the past 3 years. He always told me I didn't understand his world. He was right. I didn't just understand it, I owned it. And I had just burned it to the ground. It wasn't always about revenge. For the longest time, it was about survival. It was about navigating the choppy waters of my own family, a family that increasingly felt like Howard's personal fiefdom, where I was a visiting peasant. The turning point, the moment the ground shifted beneath my feet, didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in a sterile beige hospital waiting room 6 months ago. Our mother had a health scare, a bad one. It was a sudden cardiac event that required an immediate specialized procedure not fully covered by her insurance. The bill was staggering. I had some savings, but not enough to cover the gap, not on such short notice. I was liquidating some investments, but it would take a few days, and the hospital wanted a significant deposit up front. So I did something I swore I would never do. I asked Howard for a loan. It wasn't a gift I was after. I had the assets to cover it. I just needed the liquidity. I approached him at my sister's house, away from everyone else, trying to be discreet. I explained the situation, the urgency, the fact that it was for his own mother-in-law. I showed him the paperwork from my broker. I had never felt so small. Howard leaned back in his ridiculously expensive leather armchair, steepling his fingers. He had this way of looking at you, like he was calculating your net worth and finding it wanting. He listened to my entire humiliating pitch without saying a word. Then he let out a slow, theatrical sigh. "Andy, Andy, Andy," he said, shaking his head with an air of profound disappointment. "This is exactly what I'm always talking about. You have to be prepared for these things. A man your age, with no real safety net, it's just not responsible. My jaw tightened. Howard, this isn't about responsibility, this is about Mom. It's a short-term loan. You'll have the money back, with interest, by the end of the month. He waved a dismissive hand. It's the principle of the thing. If I give you this, what happens next time? You see, in my world, we assess risk. And you, my friend, are what we call a bad bet. He said it with a final, paternalistic pat on my shoulder. A bad bet. My own mother's health was a bad bet. He then stood up, walked into the living room where Sarah and my parents were waiting, and announced, with the magnanimity of a king, that he and Sarah would be taking care of my mother's medical expenses. He made it sound like a grand act of charity, a testament to his success and my failure. He didn't mention my request for a loan. He just framed it as him stepping in to save the day because I, the feckless freelancer, was incapable. I saw the look on my mother's face, a mixture of gratitude toward him and pity toward me. It was the most exquisitely crafted piece of humiliation I had ever witnessed. Sarah just stood there, wringing her hands, avoiding my eyes. She knew what he'd done. She knew he had the power to help me without the public theater, but she said nothing. That night, driving back to my small apartment, the city lights blurring through my windshield, something inside me broke. It was a quiet, clean snap. The years of being the butt of the joke, of swallowing his condescending remarks, of playing the role of the lovable loser, it all curdled into something cold and hard in the pit of my stomach. It was in that moment, in the cold silence of my car, that the scales fell from my eyes. He didn't just see me as a fun uncle. He saw me as a liability, a drain, a failure to be managed. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. At that point, it was about dignity. It was about drawing a line in the sand that had been eroded by years of quiet disrespect. He had assessed me as a bad bet. Fine, I decided then and there that I would never ask him, or my sister, for anything ever again. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet fury and profound isolation. I paid back my share of my mother's medical bills directly to the hospital, using a line of credit against my portfolio, and sent Howard and Sarah a cashier's check for the portion they had covered. I included a curt formal note, thanking them for the bridge loan. I knew it would annoy Howard. He didn't want to be a lender. He wanted to be a savior. A lender implies the other person has the capacity to repay. A savior gets to hold the debt of gratitude over your head forever. I got a text from Sarah a few days later. That was really passive-aggressive, Andy. Howard was just trying to help. I didn't respond. What was there to say? How could I explain that his help felt more like a branding iron? My world shrank. I stopped going to the Sunday dinners I used to love, the ones where I'd get to see Leo and Maya. I made excuses. A big project. A looming deadline. The truth was, I couldn't bear to sit at that table and watch Howard hold court, knowing what I now knew. Knowing how he saw me. Knowing how my own sister had stood by and let it happen. It was a betrayal that echoed in the silence of my apartment. I started thinking back, replaying the highlight reel of my own belittlement. It's funny how your memory works. Incidents that I had brushed off as just Howard being Howard now looked different, illuminated by the harsh glare of that hospital waiting room. I remembered the time, years ago, when I tried to start a small graphic design business. It was my passion, my big swing. It failed, as first businesses often do. I lost my savings, but I learned a ton. At every family gathering for the next 2 years, Howard would find a way to bring it up. "Remember Andy's big CEO phase?" he'd say with a chuckle, and the whole family would laugh. It was our little inside joke, except the joke was my ambition. The joke was my failure. Then there was the year he helped me with my taxes. I was a sole proprietor, and my finances were complicated. He sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by my meticulously organized receipts and files, and sighed dramatically every 5 minutes. "Good Lord, Andy, this is a mess. Don't they teach you basic bookkeeping in whatever it is you do?" He made me feel like a child who couldn't color inside the lines. He restructured everything, found a few deductions I'd missed, and then presented the final return to me as if he'd just deciphered the Rosetta Stone. For months afterward, he'd preface any financial advice with, "Now, after we fixed your little tax catastrophe." Even his compliments were insults in disguise. When I finally bought my own place, a modest but comfortable condo in a decent part of town, he toured it with the critical eye of a health inspector. "It's cozy, Andy. A great starter place. Really, you did well for your budget." For my budget. The unspoken second half of that sentence hung in the air, a pathetic little budget compared to his. And through it all there was Sarah, my sister, my Irish twin. We had been inseparable as kids, a two-person army against the world. She was the one who believed in my wild artistic dreams. She was the one who told me I was brilliant when everyone else told me to be practical. But meeting Howard changed her. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, she began to see the world through his lens. His ambition was dazzling, his confidence intoxicating, and my quiet, less linear path started to look, I suppose, like a liability in comparison. She started echoing his language. "Andy, you're just being too sensitive," she'd say, after one of Howard's barbs. "He's just trying to motivate you." She became his apologist, his translator. The sister who once defended me now managed me. The strain on our relationship was a quiet, constant ache. I missed the girl who used to think I could do anything. This was the landscape of my life when the email landed in my inbox. It was from Marcus, my partner at Veritas Analytics. Marcus is my polar opposite, where I'm driven by intuition and a feel for the narrative within the numbers. Marcus is pure, unadulterated logic. An ex-FBI guy from the white-collar crime division, he's a man who trusts spreadsheets more than people. The email subject was simple: potential engagement, Project Nightingale. The body of the email was a link to a request for proposal from a blind trust representing a major publicly traded company. The company was seeking a Tier 1 forensic accounting firm for a comprehensive top-to-bottom annual audit, with a special focus on executive expenditures and third-party vendor contracts. They wanted a firm with zero prior industry connections. They wanted a ghost. I clicked the link to the confidential prospectus. My heart hammered against my ribs. The company was Innovire Pharma. My first gut reaction was to delete the email. It was a minefield, a conflict of interest so massive it could swallow my entire firm, conducting an audit on my own brother-in-law's company. It was personal, messy, and unprofessional. I walked around my apartment for an hour, my mind racing. I could just pass. It was the smart thing to do, the right thing to do. Then I thought about that hospital waiting room. I thought about the words, "a bad bet." I thought about years of being patted on the head. I thought about the slow erosion of my own self-worth at the hands of a man who measured everyone by the size of their wallet. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. It was a last-ditch effort, a final appeal to the sister I used to know. I didn't even mention the audit. I just wanted to talk about the hospital incident, to try and make her understand how deeply it had cut me. Her voice was distracted, impatient. "Andy, can we not do this again? I told you, Howard was just trying to spare you the stress. He took care of it. Mom is fine. Why do you always have to make things so dramatic?" Dramatic? My voice was dangerously quiet. "He publicly humiliated me, Sarah. He made me feel like a beggar for trying to take care of our own mother." "Oh, stop it," she snapped. "You know how Howard is. He's blunt. He lives in a tough world. You just need to be more responsible, have a better plan. Honestly, you should be thanking him. Don't make waves, Andy. Please, for me. Don't make waves." That was it. That was the line. The final, unequivocal confirmation that my sister was no longer in my corner. She was in his. Her loyalty had been bought and paid for with a big house and a comfortable life. I felt a profound, chilling calm settle over me. The emotional turmoil vanished, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was almost painful. I hung up the phone. I sat down at my computer and wrote back to Marcus. "We're taking it, and I'm leading the forensic team myself. No one at Innovire,
No one on the board will know who is behind the curtain until the report is filed. Set up the Shell Corp for communications. Let's call it Nightingale Analytics. It's time to go to work. Howard always saw me as the fun uncle, the lovable, harmless fool. What he failed to understand is that the skills that make you good at finding a hidden Lego piece for a 5-year-old are surprisingly similar to the ones that make you good at finding a hidden shell corporation in a mountain of financial data. It's all about knowing what you're looking for and having the patience to sift through the noise to find it. It was just business, not personal, until he made it personal. Now it was both. The decision to take on the Innovire audit felt like stepping through a one-way door. The moment I told Marcus to proceed, the world bifurcated into two distinct realities. In one, I was still Andy, the affable but aimless brother-in-law, the guy who brought the best presents for the kids and could be counted on for a goofy story. In the other, secret reality, I was the lead investigator of Veritas Analytics, a man methodically dismantling the financial empire of his family's patriarch. Living in both worlds was a masterclass in compartmentalization. Marcus, true to form, handled the logistics with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. Within 24 hours, he had established a completely sterile and anonymous entity for all our communications. Nightingale Analytics was born, a Delaware-based LLC with a P.O. box, a generic website, and an untraceable encrypted email server. All contact with Innovire's audit committee would be routed through this ghost. Howard would see the name on a memo and dismiss it as just another consulting firm, another line item on a budget he'd probably approved without a second thought. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The first data dump arrived on a set of encrypted hard drives delivered by a bonded courier. 5 terabytes of financial records, internal emails, vendor contracts, expense reports, and board meeting minutes. It was the entire financial soul of Innovire Pharma for the last 5 years. Looking at the stack of drives on my desk, I felt a tremor of something that wasn't quite fear, but a profound sense of gravity. This wasn't just about Howard anymore. This was about a publicly traded company with thousands of employees and shareholders. My personal grievance had put me in a position of immense responsibility. Marcus must have seen it on my face. "Let the numbers talk, Andy," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We're not here to prove a theory. We're here to find the truth, whatever it is." He was my anchor, the dispassionate professional who kept me from letting my personal feelings cloud my judgment. His presence was a constant reminder that our firm's reputation was on the line. We had to be perfect, incontrovertible. The first week was about structure. We built a timeline, mapping out every major financial event, every acquisition, every significant capital expenditure. We fed the email servers into a program that cross-referenced names, keywords, and project codes. It was like building a massive 3-dimensional map of Howard's corporate life. For days, it was just noise, the mundane day-to-day churn of a massive corporation. Then I found the first thread. It was almost nothing, a recurring monthly payment to a company called Alpine Holdings LLC. The payments were classified under strategic marketing consultancy, but the amounts were suspiciously consistent, exactly $150,000 every month on the dot. And there were no corresponding marketing reports, no deliverables, no email chains discussing their performance. It was a ghost invoice. "Marcus, come look at this," I said, my voice low. He came over to my workstation, peering at the screen. He grunted. "Alpine Holdings, never heard of them. Pull their corporate records." It took us less than an hour. Alpine Holdings was a Delaware LLC, just like our own Shell. Its registered agent was a generic corporate services company. But when we dug into the incorporation documents, we found the name of the signatory, a man named Julian Croft. A quick search of Howard's public social media profiles gave us the connection. Julian Croft was Howard's roommate from his MBA program. A photo from 2 years ago showed them together on a golf course in Scottsdale, arms around each other, grinning. The caption read, "Closing deals with my oldest friend." Well, Marcus murmured. "What a coincidence." That was the first domino. From there, the whole rotten structure started to wobble. We pulled every payment to Alpine Holdings and traced where the money went. It flowed from Alpine's corporate account to a second shell company in the Cayman Islands, and from there, a portion of it was transferred to a private wealth management account. We couldn't legally access the name on that final account, but the circumstantial evidence was damning. This wasn't a marketing expense. It was a kickback scheme, beautifully simple and elegantly hidden in plain sight. The deeper we dug, the more we found. It was a whole ecosystem of fraud, all orchestrated by Howard. There was a real estate deal where Innovator had purchased a well at Corchums, New Jersey for 3 times its market value. The seller, a property group whose primary investor was, we discovered through a public record, it's Howard's father. There were the expense reports, a treasure trove of personal luxuries billed as corporate necessities, a board retreat in Aspen that coincided perfectly with his family's annual ski trip, a 20th to a motivational speaker who happened to be the interior designer for his new home. But the real masterpiece was the Pharma Logistics International scheme. PLI was supposedly a third-party logistics partner based in Panama, responsible for handling Innovator's overseas shipping. Innovator paid them tens of millions a year. When we investigated, we found that PLI consisted of a single rented office and a forwarding address. Its employee list was a roster of ghosts, but those ghosts had names and social security numbers, and they were receiving paychecks. We cross-referenced the names against Howard's personal contacts, old college friends, distant cousins, even the son of his landscaper. He was using Innovator's pay to funnel money to his personal network, creating a slush fund of loyalists who owed him everything. It was audacious. It was going to be his ruin. While I was spending my nights tracing illicit wire transfers, I was still expected to play my role in the family drama. Sarah would call, her voice laced with a new kind of brittle cheerfulness. "We're having a barbecue on Saturday, Andy. You should come. The kids miss you." "I'm busy, Sarah," I'd say, my eyes locked on a spreadsheet that showed Howard had expensed a $5,000 bottle of wine as a client gift. "You're always busy lately," she'd sigh. Being distant. "Is this still about that whole thing with Mom? You have to let that go." "Howard feels terrible about how you took it." "How I took it?" The manipulation was so ingrained, so reflexive, she probably didn't even realize she was doing it. The narrative had been successfully rewritten. Howard's cruelty was now my oversensitivity. It was a textbook move, and it only strengthened my resolve. Every conversation with her was fuel. Every passive-aggressive text was another reason to keep digging. The subplot of my relationship with Sarah, but the woman she had become was a stranger to me, a willing accomplice in my erasure. Part of me hoped that exposing Howard would be a wake-up call for her, a chance for her to find her way back to herself. Another, more cynical part of me knew she might just hate me for blowing up the comfortable world she'd worked so hard to protect. It was a risk I had to take. After 2 months of relentless work, we had it. It wasn't just a report, it was an airtight legal case. We had a 300-page document filled with flowcharts, bank statements, and copies of incriminating emails Howard thought were long deleted from the company servers. We had sworn affidavits from 2 of the ghost employees from the Panama scheme, whom Marcus had tracked down and convinced to talk in exchange for. We had documented over $70 million in fraudulent transactions, all leading directly. We had documented over $70 million in fraudulent transactions, all leading directly or indirectly back to the office of the CFO. The night before we submitted the report, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my office, the city a tapestry of distant lights outside my window. The finished report sat on my desk, a thick heavy slab of paper that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This was the point of no return. Clicking send would detonate a bomb in the middle of my family. It would destroy my sister's marriage, her home, her entire life. It would change my relationship with her and her children forever. Was this justice, or was it just a cold, elaborate revenge? The question echoed in the quiet room. I thought of Howard's smirk. I thought of his condescending tone. I thought of the phrase "a bad bet," and then I thought of something else. I thought of the employees at Innovator, who would lose their jobs if the company went under because of his greed. I thought of the shareholders whose retirement funds were tied to the health of the company he was bleeding dry. My personal grievance had led me here, but the crime was bigger than me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about consequences. I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and attached the file to an email addressed to the chairman of Innovire's audit committee. The subject line was simple: Nightingale Analytics Final Audit Report. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then I clicked it. The little swoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox was the quietest explosion I had ever heard. The silent takeover had begun. The first 48 hours after I sent the report were the strangest of my life. It was like I had thrown a boulder into a perfectly still lake and was now standing on the shore, waiting for the ripples to reach me. I knew the impact would be massive, but I had no direct line of sight. My anonymity was my shield, but it was also a curtain. I went about my days in a state of hyper-awareness, scanning financial news sites, watching Innovire's stock ticker like a hawk. For one full day there was nothing. Silence. I started to wonder if they were trying to bury it, if Howard's influence was so great that he could make a 300-page fraud report simply disappear. Then on the second day the first tremor hit. At 11:03 a.m. trading on Innovire Pharma stock in VP was abruptly halted. The official reason given was pending news. My heart started to pound. That was it. The bomb had gone off. An hour later, Innovire released a terse two-sentence press statement. Innovire Pharma is currently in the process of reviewing its internal financial controls in cooperation with its independent auditors. Further information will be released in due course. It was corporate doublespeak for our house is on fire. The real confirmation came that evening, in the form of a frantic phone call from Sarah. I saw her name flash on my screen, and I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing my voice into a mask of casual indifference. Andy. Oh, thank God you answered. She sounded breathless, on the verge of tears. Hey Sarah, what's up? I asked as if I were just watching TV. Something's wrong. Something is really wrong at Howard's work. He came home a few hours ago and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He won't talk to me. He just went straight into his study and has been on the phone ever since. I can hear him shouting through the door. Something about an audit. A ghost firm. Do you know what that means? Did you hear anything? The temptation to say yes, I know everything was immense. It would have been so easy to just end the charade right there. But the plan required patience. The full effect depended on Howard not knowing where the attack came from until the very last moment. A ghost firm. No idea, Sarah. That sounds like something out of a spy movie. I said, the feigned innocence feeling sour in my mouth. Why would I hear anything? I just build my little websites and sell artisanal birdhouses, remember? I couldn't resist that little jab. She didn't touch the sarcasm. I know, it's just you know people. You're a consultant. I didn't know if you'd heard any chatter. Sorry, my chatter is usually about search engine optimization, not Fortune 500 intrigue. I'm sure it's just some corporate nonsense. Howard will sort it out. He always does. She seemed to cling to that. You're right. Of course you're right. He'll fix it. She sounded like she was trying to convince herself more than me. We hung up and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. He was panicking, and his first instinct wasn't to confide in his wife but to lock himself away and try to bully his way out of it. The arrogance was bottomless. He still thought he could fix it.
Over the next few days, the pressure escalated. I learned through an old contact in the financial journalism world that Innovire had called an emergency, all-hands board meeting. The entire executive team was on lockdown. Howard, my source told me, was desperately trying to find out who was behind Nightingale Analytics. He was pulling every string he had, calling in favors, trying to get a name. But Marcus had built the fortress well. Nightingale Analytics didn't exist outside of a P.O. box in Wilmington and an encrypted server in a server farm in Iceland. It was a digital phantom. Howard was punching at smoke. His panic began to spill over. I got another call from Sarah 2 days later. This time she was weeping openly. They suspended him, Andy, she sobbed into the phone. They suspended him pending the outcome of the investigation. They came to the house, men in suits. They took his company laptop, his phone. He's a mess. He's just sitting in his study, staring at the wall. He says someone set him up, that this is a professional hit job. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. He thinks it might be someone from the board, someone who wants his job. He's making a list of his enemies. A list of his enemies. I almost laughed. The thought of him sitting in his mahogany-paneled shrine to capitalism, scribbling down the names of his corporate rivals, while the real threat was the brother-in-law he'd dismissed as a harmless buffoon. It was a portrait of poetic justice, so perfect I couldn't have written it better myself. Sarah, that's terrible. I said, my voice dripping with carefully measured sympathy. What are you going to do? I don't know, she cried. Our assets are frozen. The credit cards are being declined. Howard says we could lose everything. The house, the club membership, the kids' schools. Andy, I'm scared. Then came the words I was waiting for. Can you come over, please? I need you here. Howard needs you here. Howard needs me. The man who called me a bad bet now needed me. It was time for the final act. Of course, Sarah, I said. I'll be right there. Driving up the winding road to their house was a surreal experience. This was the fortress of Howard's success, the physical manifestation of his superiority over me. The perfectly manicured lawns, the imposing stone facade, the 3-car garage with the gleaming black Porsche sitting in the driveway like a dormant beast. But today the whole place felt different. It didn't feel like a palace. It felt like a tomb. The grandeur was hollow, a brittle shell over the panic and rot within. Sarah opened the door before I even knocked. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her usually immaculate hair was a mess. She threw her arms around me, clinging to me like I was a piece of driftwood in a storm. Thank you for coming, she whispered. I walked into the house. The cavernous marble entryway, usually so intimidating, was cold and silent. I could hear a low murmur coming from Howard's study. Sarah gestured toward the closed double doors. He's in there. He's been not good. She led me to the kitchen and poured me a glass of water, her hands shaking. He keeps saying it's a frame job, that the numbers were manipulated by this outside firm. He says they're nobody, a no-name company that came out of nowhere. How could the board be so stupid as to trust them? I just nodded, letting her talk. She was spinning, trying to find a version of reality she could live with. In her mind, Howard had to be the victim. The alternative, that her husband, the father of her children, the source of her entire lifestyle, was a common criminal, was simply too catastrophic to contemplate. It was a textbook case of willful blindness. This was the debatable character logic in action. Her choices were emotionally plausible, even if they were objectively insane. After a few minutes, the study doors opened, and Howard emerged. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 days. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie was loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw me, a flicker of the old arrogance returned. He saw me not as a threat, but as a tool. The fun uncle, the simple, likable guy. He clapped me on the shoulder, a forced, hearty gesture. Andy, good of you to come. A bit of a storm in a teacup here, but we'll get through it. He led me into his study, the room where he'd lectured me about being a bad bet. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. He sat down behind his massive desk and tried to compose himself, to put on the mask of the powerful CFO. Listen, Andy, he began, leaning forward conspiratorially. I need a favor. You're good with people. Sarah listens to you. She's emotional right now. I need you to keep her calm. I need you to talk to her, reassure her that this is all a big misunderstanding, a corporate witch hunt. It's important that we present a united front, for the family, for the kids. He was trying to recruit me as his emotional support idiot, the role he'd always assigned me. I just stared at him, my face a blank canvas, and said nothing. My silence seemed to unnerve him. He cleared his throat and decided to sweeten the pot. He made his final fatal mistake. Look, he said, his voice dropping, I know things have been tight for you. If you can help me with this, help me manage Sarah and keep the family looking solid while I sort this mess out, there's 100,000 in it for you. Cash, you could really use that, right? Pay off some debts, get yourself a real safety net. There it was, The ultimate insult, wrapped in a life raft of cash. He was trying to buy me, to make me a co-conspirator in his delusion, using the very thing he believed defined me, my perceived need for his money. He didn't see a brother-in-law, he saw a hired hand. The power dynamic he had so carefully cultivated for a decade had just given me the perfect opening. He had no idea he had just handed me the sword. The family exodus from reality was complete. They were now stranded on an island of his lies, and he was trying to pay me to be a native guide. It was time to show him who really owned the island. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just watched its prey walk directly into a trap. Howard saw it and faltered, a flicker of confusion in his bloodshot eyes. He had expected gratitude, maybe some fumbling, eager acceptance. He had not expected this. 100,000? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the polished mahogany of his desk, the desk that served as his throne. Howard, the numbers I've been looking at for the past 3 months are a lot bigger than that. His brow furrowed. The confident mask of the CFO was cracking, revealing the panicked man underneath. What are you talking about? What numbers? I'm talking about the $4.2 million you funneled through Alpine Holdings. For starters, I said, my voice as calm and clear as a bell. Each word was a perfectly placed stone, landing with a heavy thud in the silent room. I'm talking about the 18% kickback you got from that Malaysian supplier, disguised as a marketing expense. I'm talking about the 37 ghost employees on the payroll of Pharma Logistics International in Panama, whose salaries were deposited into accounts you control. Howard's face, which had been pale, was now completely drained of blood. He looked like a statue. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He was processing, the gears of his brilliant financial mind grinding to a halt as they tried to reconcile the impossible. How could the lovable idiot, the fun uncle, know these names? These numbers? I wasn't finished. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I'm talking about the company that the board hired to conduct the audit. The ghost firm you've been so desperate to identify. Nightingale Analytics. I let the name hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final killing blow. It's a shell corp. The real firm is called Veritas Analytics, and it's mine. The collapse was instantaneous and total. It wasn't a dramatic screaming breakdown. It was an implosion. The arrogance, the condescension, the entire carefully constructed persona of Howard the Master of the Universe simply vanished. In his place was a terrified, broken man. His eyes, wide with disbelief and horror, were locked on mine. He sank back into his chair as if his bones had turned to dust. The mask was gone. The king was naked. At that exact moment, the study door creaked open. Sarah was standing there, a tray with coffee cups in her hands. She had heard it all. Her eyes darted from Howard's ashen, terrified face to my calm, resolute one. The tray slipped from her fingers, crashing to the hardwood floor, the shattering porcelain echoing the sound of her world breaking apart. The truth, undeniable and brutal, had finally landed. She looked at her husband, not as the powerful protector she had believed in, but as a fraud. And she looked at me, her brother, not as the harmless fool, but as the executioner. I didn't gloat. There was no need. The numbers had done all the talking for me. I stood up straight, feeling a decade of suppressed weight lift from my shoulders. I looked directly at Howard, who was now just staring blankly at his desk, his grand life in ruins around him. You built a career on lies, Howard, I said, my voice even. And you spent 10 years mocking me because my life was small and honest. You thought I was a joke. The problem is you never bothered to stick around for the punchline. I turned and walked toward the door, pausing beside my sister, who was frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt a surge of the old protective love I'd always had for her, untainted by resentment. It was a love mixed with a deep, profound sorrow for the choice she had made. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said, and I meant it. "I truly am, but this was his doing, not mine." Then I walked out. I walked through the marble entryway, past the shattered coffee cups, and out the front door into the clean, cool air. I didn't run. I didn't look back. The power dynamic wasn't just shifted, it was annihilated. He had made my life a business decision, a bad bet. So I audited his, and his company had just called in the debt. The months that followed were a strange mixture of chaos and quiet. Howard's downfall was swift and brutal. The audit report from Veritas Analytics was leaked to the press. I still don't know by whom, but I have my suspicions. It was a rival board member looking to clean house. The story was a financial media sensation. CFO of Innovire Pharma fired in massive fraud scandal. The SEC launched a formal investigation. Federal charges were filed. Howard, the man who lectured me on financial responsibility, was facing the possibility of a long time in a place where his German sports car couldn't follow. Sarah filed for divorce within a month. The house, the club memberships, the private schools, it all evaporated like a mirage. The assets were frozen as part of the federal case, and what little was left was drained by Howard's legal fees. She and the kids, Leo and Maya, moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a part of town Howard used to joke about. Our relationship, Sarah's and mine, is a work in progress. It's a slow, tentative reconstruction on the rubble of our family. The first time we spoke after that day, she called me, her voice small. She didn't accuse me. She didn't rage. She just asked, "Did you have to?" Yes, I told her. Honestly, I did. He was never going to stop Sarah, and sooner or later it would have all collapsed anyway. This way, at least the company might survive. At least the other employees have a chance. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, "You were right. I know you were right. I let myself believe the lie because it was beautiful." It was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. She apologized. A real gut-wrenching apology for all the times she stood by and said nothing, for all the times she chose his comfort over my dignity. It wasn't a magic wand. It didn't erase a decade of pain, but it was a start. I help her out now. I pay for the kids' tutors. I take them on weekends building the same Lego spaceships we always have. I'm still their fun uncle, but the meaning has changed. It's not a consolation prize anymore. It's just who I am. Our relationship is simpler now, built on truth instead of pretense. So I ask myself the question I know is on your mind. Did I go too far? Should I have recused my firm? Should I have passed on the job and let some other anonymous company uncover Howard's crimes? From a purely ethical, by-the-book standpoint, maybe. Some people would say, I let my personal feelings compromise my professional judgment. They'd say I made it personal. But here's the thing, it was already personal. It was personal every time he smirked at my job. It was personal every time he used my failures as a punchline at a family dinner. It was personal when he stood in that hospital waiting room and called me a bad bet while our mother's health hung in the balance. He spent a decade treating me as a line item in the budget of his life, an amusing but ultimately worthless expense. He couldn't see the man, only the perceived failure. He never once thought to ask what I actually did for a living. He just assumed it was nothing of consequence. That was his fatal mistake. He thought I was playing checkers while he was playing chess, and never realized I was the one who owned the entire board. In the end, it really wasn't about the revenge. That was just the spark. It was about the truth. The truth that competence isn't always loud. The truth that quiet people have value. The truth that underestimating someone is the most dangerous risk you can take. And the truth, as it turns out, is a hell of an asset. I don't know if you've ever had someone in your life who constantly underestimated you, who put you in a box and refused to see you as anything more. What do you do when the people who are supposed to have your back are the ones holding the knife? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read them all. And if you want to hear more stories about the tables being turned and justice being served, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Thanks for listening.